Many people don't realize that child marriage happens in the U.S., and they certainly don't realize just how lax state laws really are.
He's 42, he's already been married twice, he has 2 younger kids. At this point, I'm just barely 15.
Well, my mother figured it was a good idea for me to be married to this rapist.
I am an American girl who was taken off American soil. I was a passport to this man.
I'm surprised at the opposition that we get changing child marriage.
For the most part, the opposition has come from the far right. And yet in California, we were shocked that the opposition came from the other side.
The right to marry is a reproductive health rights and justice issue. 16 and 17-year-olds have the right to be supported. They're not children, they're not toddlers.
We have been married for 3 months. There's a lot of kids that have to grow up fast.
We lived in a trailer park. My mom did not enroll me in school. So there was this man that would often be outside smoking on the front porch of the trailer. And I noticed him watching me a few times, you know, just walking by. And then one day he was like, "Hey, are you new around here?" He's 42. He's already been married twice. He has 2 younger kids. He started commenting on, you know, I was so beautiful and I look older than, you know, I really am. And then like he would put his hand on my thigh, and then it just progressed into more inappropriate behavior. And at this point, my mom kind of figured out that I was spending time at his house. So she called the police, and she was like, "I know what's going on and whatnot." And so he was arrested. He made bail, you know, he's waiting a trial. And then my mom, she starts telling me that this is my fault, that I've done this, I've seduced this person, that, you know, he's going to lose his job, he's going to lose his children, he's going to go to jail, and it's up to me to fix it. And my mom, I mean, I could write a book alone just on the schemes and the shenanigans that my mom came up with. You know, this wasn't unusual. So this proposition comes to me that if I get married to him, then since we're married to each other, I can't testify against him, and so they're not going to have a case and the charges will be dropped. So really my mom was the one that organized all of this. At this point, I'm just barely 15, and I didn't really believe that I could get married at my age. In the conversations that we had, he said, "You know what, I can help you out. So if you marry me, then I'm not going to have to worry about going to jail, and my life is not going to be turned upside down. And then I know that your home life is really bad, so you can stay with me and then get out of that situation." So that's how it was kind of presented to me.
So this is our collection of wedding gowns that people donate to us that we can use for our chain-ins, where we protest child marriage wearing bridal gowns and veils with our wrists chained and our mouths taped to show the world what life looks like when a girl or a woman is forced to marry. When I say I'm working to end child marriage, people say, "Oh, that's great. Are you working in Iran? Are you working in Africa?" No, I'm talking about right here in the United States, whatever state you live in. I'm working there or have worked there to end child marriage. So the typical exceptions to the marriage age are, across the US, of course the laws vary, but the typical ones are you can marry before 18 if you have parental consent, or in some cases, judicial approval. And I want to talk about why both of those are really dangerous. So first, parental consent. That is typically nothing more than a parent's signature on a form. We know that when someone here in the United States is forced to marry, the perpetrators are almost always the parents. Having the parents sign a form before they force a child to marry, it does nothing to protect the child. Nobody even asks the child, "Are you okay with this?" There's no interview process at all. In fact, I know of several different survivors who showed up sobbing at the clerk's office. Some of them openly begged for help, and there's nothing that the clerk could do. The judicial approval process in a lot of states, first of all, has no criteria that a judge is required to consider before approving the marriage of a child. The judge in many cases is not even required to interview the child or the other party. Not, by the way, that that would even help, because in states where the judge is required to interview the child, what we have found is that these kids are too scared to tell the judge what's actually happening because they have to go home with their parents. They're kids, they live with their parents.
I was abused as a child. I was forced to be married at the age of 11, but I was also raped at the age of 8, and then again at the age of 9, which I got pregnant from. And then I had my daughter at the age of 10. And then at 11, I was forced to marry my rapist. They put the handcuffs on me and let him go free. He was the deacon. That's how I met him. He was the deacon in the church. Well, my mother figured it was a good idea. She thought it was such a great idea. She made my wedding dress. She made the wedding cake. And she took me to the courthouse that would marry me. Because the first courthouse she went to in Tampa, Florida, refused. The judge refused and said they would not do it. That she had to find somewhere else to get it done for me to be married to this rapist. So she did. And she went to Pinellas County Courthouse, and the only thing they requested was a letter that I signed that I did give birth to a child. And I signed that letter. And she's allowing this to happen. She's not saying, no, you're not going to do my daughter that way at all. I'm a mother, a wife, and like they say, a 5th grader. And he have yet to spend any time in jail.
So the term statutory rape typically refers to a criminal law, and a criminal law that says that if someone is under a certain age, and sometimes also if someone else, the other party, is over a certain age, then sex between the two of them would be a crime. Age at marriage in some states is set lower than you can legally consent to sex with a person, with the same party, right, outside of marriage. In some states, sex before marriage isn't permitted between those parties, but it is sanctioned once you are married. That is, there's a specific defense saying if the parties are married, what would have been statutory rape just isn't. So what is so stunning about that really is that the civil courts are permitting and sanctioning and handing out quite literally a license to engage in behavior that criminal courts would penalize and put someone perhaps on a sex offender registry for.
I think we all used to think the best thing for a pregnant teenage girl is if she gets married. She and the baby are better off. And actually what studies show is a pregnant teenage girl in the United States who marries is more likely to suffer economic deprivation and instability than a pregnant teenage girl who stays single.
Once married, she's more likely to become pregnant again, pregnant multiple times, pregnant at a young age.
She's 50% more likely to drop out of high school and 4 times less likely ever to finish college.
Women who marry as girls also face risks of divorce up to 80%. Those who marry underage are already divorced 23% of the time by the time they turn age 18.
If she marries young here in the United States, she's 31% more likely to end up living in poverty as an adult. If she's married at or before 18 in the United States, a girl or a woman faces a 23% increased risk of heart attack, cancer, diabetes, and stroke. I mean, this can literally kill.
So they promised you to your cousin at 8?
Yes. I left America as a 14-year-old. October 24th, I turned 15 in Pakistan. That January, I had to go live with him, so I was only 15. I was only 15. It was a legal marriage. I was legally married in the eyes of the Pakistani government and the American government.
I am an American girl who was taken off the American New York, like Long Island soil. I'm a Queens girl.
And I was a passport to this man. inside of me, I was dying, especially the moment when nighttime came and I had to go into the bedroom. I went into the bedroom and he was there and he came, and I remember putting like a big pillow in between us. All night he tried to like touch me and stuff, and I didn't know what to tell him. I told him, I don't like you. So he was very disappointed and he started getting meaner by the day. And on the 10th day, I realized I can't do this anymore. I get to Islamabad, but when I get off the bus terminal, it's all men. And the Taliban are out and about. I live in the northwest frontier, which is very dangerous. Eventually I gave in, called the uncle to come and get me. And when he came and got me, he was basically telling me, you know, everything's gonna be okay. And I hear a Jeep pull up and I heard like footsteps jumping out of it. It's like a high Jeep. And then I heard the click of the AK-47s. And I was like, oh my God. I sat in the car, my ex-husband was in the front, my aunt was here, my other cousin was driving. He goes, you're a whore, your mom is a whore. And he turns and he backhanded me in the back, like he's in the front, he turns and he backhanded me. I remember thinking to myself, is the bullet gonna burn? Are they gonna stab me? Are they gonna put acid on me? And he took me and whipped me with the electrical cable in front of everyone. And I remember my mother screaming so hard, but she couldn't do anything. They had to hold my older sister, like, because she was going insane. I'm now living in hell, getting raped every day, cooking for the family, just living in hell, being a slave.
The United States government has some really beautifully written policies on child marriage, articulating that it's a human rights abuse in and of itself, but also that it's a human rights abuse that can perpetuate other human rights abuses, such as, you know, the right to live free from violence, the right to education. U.S. domestic policy is a totally separate ball of wax because states' rights are so important, and the way this country was founded really matters in the way that laws on marriage play out. So they're very uneven. So right now the state of play is that the immigration system allows for children to be taken abroad to be married, often forced into a marriage, or for minors to be brought into this country to marry adult American citizens.
Right now, shockingly, there is no minimum age in the United States to petition for a foreign spouse or fiance, or to be the beneficiary of a spousal or fiance visa. And we know that thousands of children are being forced to marry so that they can petition for an overseas spouse.
The United States has always had a vested interest in regulating marriage because being married gets you certain things and gets you treated in certain ways. So it's a national policy issue as much as it is about love and relationships. It is clear that right now more and more people are interested in paying attention to the issue of child marriage, and there are activist groups that are very much hoping to close off those exceptions, the loopholes in the laws, and make some, generally speaking, 18 as the sort of the absolute minimum without exception. Even in a moment when there's concern about children getting married, it's still garnered a fair bit of support, and we even see this today when people are worried about restricting young people from getting married, largely because of issues around sex. So when people have supported the rights of children to marry, it's because either they fear that they are having sex outside of marriage and they believe that sex would be better contained within marriage, or because a girl is pregnant and there's a sustained belief that the child will be better off if raised within a marital home.
For the most part, the opposition has come from the far right. And yet in California, it was, I guess because of that we were shocked that the opposition came from the other side. There were groups that consider themselves feminist and consider themselves progressive that said that somehow ending child marriage is going to impede reproductive rights. It's going to undermine reproductive rights, and therefore they were opposed to it.
We're the policy and political arm in the state of Maryland for reproductive rights. We look at how we can help individuals through policies, through laws, through best practices and education to make sure that every individual can decide if, when, and how they form their families. For the last 3 years, they've introduced the bill to ban marriage under the age of 18, and we've been opponents of this legislation. When you ban marriage under the age of 18, what you're doing is not recognizing that the right to marry is a reproductive health rights and justice issue. And I believe that the proponents for this were concerned about forced marriage, specifically under the age of 18. And it's a reproductive rights issue for us to all want to eliminate forced marriage, but it was butting two of those issues against one another. The right to marry figures into pregnancy decision making. And so if a young person is pregnant and her parent or legal guardian won't let her be with her partner or marry her partner, that could figure into whether or not she feels that she can be a parent. And do we really want to set up young people for reproductive coercion? Having the right to marry allows us to access health insurance with our partner. We can be married and have access to married school, married student housing in colleges. We have the right to access military benefits. We solidify our custody and visitation rights. And those all are very important. We felt that it made sense at the age to consent to sex, being the age of 16, that 16 and 17-year-olds would have this right to marry.
Apollo. Athena.
He is not 40, he's like, yep, no.
Apollo, are you being camera shy?
We can't have that.
Athena said hi. My name's Carmen Littlejohn, and I'm 17.
My name is Blake Littlejohn, I'm 19.
How long have you guys been married?
About
2 months-ish?
3.
2 or 3.
We live with my dad, my 2 sisters, 1 half and 1 step, and my stepmom. My situation growing up wasn't easy. It wasn't always stable. It was difficult because we moved around a lot. My stepdad, he's in the military, so we moved all over Florida, and we've been to Washington State. We lived in Texas 1 year. Yeah, we just moved around a lot, and it was hard for me, in school especially, and making friends. So I wanted to stay in one place, and this is my home.
So you are an emancipated minor?
Yes, I am an emancipated minor. That was one thing my mom didn't want. She didn't want me to leave her.
And all of that fear of the kid growing up and going away.
And I understood it, but it was almost as if she was kind of controlling me. So I've always wanted to live here, and we as in me and my dad, tried to look for a way to go against our custody arrangement without having to go to court. And so my stepmom looked into our court arrangement, and it basically stated that if I got married, it would not exist. So she found a way for us to get married in a short period of time. So this has gotten me to a point where I can advance everything I wanted to do and just start it early in life.
Too early?
I don't think it's too early.
Never too early. You only live once.
I don't think parents should really, there are some things they need to control, but you come to a point in your life where you make your own decisions.
How young is too young?
15 and 16, that's probably too young, in my opinion. You gotta at least know what the real world's like. You gotta be out, her situation's a lot different. Too much traveling, going to too many different schools. I understand why she had wanting to be in Texas. The law doesn't know who you are, what you've been through. The law is not you. Can't tell you you're not grown. They don't know what you've been through in your life.
Yeah, there's a lot of kids, I guess you could call them kids, or people that are underage that have to grow up fast, and they have to take on responsibilities at a young age. And I feel like if you show that you have those characteristics and have had to do those, that you should be able to make decisions like that.
The arguments against child marriage have nothing to do with maturity. Legislators like to think of them as young women. They're not. They're girls. They're not adults. They're girls who in many cases don't even have the right to file for divorce or get into a domestic violence shelter. If you're not old enough to file for divorce, I'm sorry, you're not old enough to get married. And if you can that easily be trapped in a marriage, then that marriage just shouldn't be an option for you.
Since 2016, there have been 20 states that have passed bills to end or limit child marriage, and there have been several more that have taken up legislation or are in the process of considering it. And that's a really striking outcome in a very short period of time. I'm optimistic, actually, that at this point in the movement that we are going to continue to see this kind of exponential growth in the awareness by the public and policymakers. Delaware, the first state, became the first state to ban child marriage altogether under the age of 18. We now have several more states that have set that bar at legal adulthood, either 18 or having just a narrow exception for emancipated minors. It's a start in a much longer journey for that state and for the nation as a whole.
I helped change the law in Florida. I advocated that law, and it is changed to 17, which is a lot better. Now we have a floor.
You know, I've been doing this for 5 years. 5 years of nonstop work, and I've seen changes in New Jersey. It was one of the best moments of my life.
Indiana has not changed their laws. They're one of 6 states that are left that have the pregnancy exception. So you can be 15 and pregnant and marry somebody who is 18, 28, 68, 78, whatever.
End child marriage now! Ask us and we'll tell you how! Only bills that we at Unchained at Last fight for are a hard 18. No child should be forced to marry, ever. Period. End of sentence.